Professor Dr. Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, 6th President of the Republic of Indonesia, distinguished guests, students, colleagues, and members of the SMU community, and in particularly a very warm welcome to all of you who are of Indonesian origin. We have many students from Indonesia, and we're proud of our relationships, and this is a very special day for us that we can welcome you here today with so many of your country fellow men and women to SMU. I'm delighted to welcome all of you to the second lecture of the Presidential Distinguished Lecture Series in 2016. For those among you who were here this morning for the launch of Dato Sri's Professor Dr. Tahir's book, thank you for staying on. I'm sure you will have a fascinating day today. Dr. Tahir did a great job this morning in introducing his book, and I would like to congratulate and welcome him once again. As you know, our speaker this afternoon is Dr. Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, 6th President of the Republic of Indonesia and one of Asia's most respected statesmen. He started his career as a military officer, became a 4-star general, politician, and cabinet minister. In 2004, as we already heard, he became the country's first directly elected president in the democratic era in Indonesia, and was re-elected in 2009, winning with an outright majority in the first ballot. He served 2 full terms, the maximum allowed, if I understand well, under the Constitution. This popular endorsement of his time in office reflects how he overcame many serious challenges with a firm but steady hand. He helped the country to recover and rebuild after the devastating tsunami in 2004 and established special agencies at the national and regional levels which increased Indonesia's ability to deal with natural disasters such as earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, landslides, and floods. Nearly 30 years of conflict with separatists in Aceh was peacefully and permanently resolved in mid-2005. Dr. Yudhoyono relentlessly pursued his 4-track economic strategy of pro-growth, pro-job, pro-poor, and pro-environment. His development mantra was sustainable growth with equity. The World Economic Forum called his 2 terms in office between 2004 and 2014 Indonesia's golden decade. As president of the country with the world's largest Muslim population, Dr. Yudhoyono has become a very strong advocate for peaceful and moderate Islam, both internally as well as on the global stage. He devoted great efforts to develop closer relationships between the Western and the Islamic world. And he also staunchly promoted and became an architect of many military reforms and championed Indonesia's robust peacekeeping operations around the world. Born in 1949, Dr. Yudhoyono has also an extensive academic background, and I want to mention this here because we are at the university, besides a distinguished career leading the Indonesian government and economy. He holds a doctorate degree in agricultural economics from Bohor Institute of Agriculture and obtained that in 2004. And we discussed that this morning, how much time he had to spend in classes and writing the thesis, and we expressed as academics our admiration for having had the guts to, and the time and the effort and the courage to take on this task. He has also a master's degree in management from Webster University in St. Louis, United States, that he obtained in 1991. As was mentioned, he's presently chairman of the Global Green Growth Institute based in Seoul, Korea. His lecture here today will be on Indonesian-themed events and will cover what has been achieved over the last 10 years when he was in office. But it's also a moment for us here at SMU, I would say, to accentuate a strengthening of the bonds between our university and Indonesia. In December 2015, we signed a 5-year student exchange agreement with Universitas Gadjah Mada, or in short UGM, in Yogyakarta, which allows for the exchange of students for a semester each year. And this was followed last month. On the April 4th, we signed an agreement, a 3-year agreement with UGM to support faculty exchange and development, research initiatives, sharing of best practices in university governance, and further undergraduate and postgraduate student exchanges. This agreement was supported by the establishment of the $1 million Tahir Foundation SMU UGM Management and Faculty Development Program. And again, we thank you, Dr. Tahir, for the support. SMU also has been running quite a lot of community service projects in Indonesia, including a project that is called Beyond Borders. Now it's in its 5th year, and where currently, actually, 21 SMU students are teaching conversational English in Bintan. We also have our own Indonesian student club, SMU Komunitas Indonesia, which has some 150 active members and promotes Indonesian arts and culture, both inside and outside of the SMU community. I have always insisted that we need to have closer relationships with Indonesia, between Singapore and Indonesia, and between SMU and Indonesia. It is a country that we should all keep our eyes on. It is a very important neighbor of Singapore, and I would say the driving force in ASEAN. What happens in Indonesia has importance for all of us. We have students serving internships there every year, and we know we have also a very active SMU alumni group with SMU graduates who are making an impact in their fields in the country. Given this level of interest, I suspect that many of you here today may have already engaged with Dr. Yudhoyono on social media, where I noticed when I went to his Facebook that he has almost 5.5 million or even more followers on Facebook and 9 million followers on Twitter. It's beyond my ambition. Just for today, you can put away your phones and tablets. No need to go to Twitter, no need to go to Facebook or any other. You can listen to the man himself, to this renowned political leader himself. Thank you very much for having accepted our invitation.
Professor Arnold, thank you for your nice words of introductions. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. May peace be upon us all. Professor Arnold de Meyer, President of Singapore Management University, Datuk Sri Professor Dr. Tahir, Executive Chairman of Mayapada Group and founder of Tahir Foundation, Excellency Ambassador of Indonesia to Singapore, and members of Diplomatic Corps who are stationed here in Singapore, my colleague, former ministers from the United Indonesian Cabinet. I recognize the presence of Bapak Hatta Rajasa, former Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs, Mr. Amir Samsudin, former Minister for Justice and Human Rights, Bapak Sarifudin Hasan, former Minister for Cooperative and Small and Medium Enterprises, former Chief of Staff of the Air Force General, Imam Supaat, members of the Parliament, Bapak Marwara Sirait, my colleague, famous human rights activist leader in Indonesia, Bapak Todong Mulya Lubis, and I think there are many other colleagues who are coming from Jakarta to attend. Bapak Yusuf Wanandi, my good friend, one of the best Indonesian thinkers in international relations, also with us today. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank Singapore Management University and Datuk Sri Professor Dr. Tahir for inviting me to this wonderful occasion. It is a distinct honor for me to speak at Singapore Management University. Based on the quality of the graduates and the commitment to market-driven research, SMU is truly one of the best universities in Asia and the world. Also, in this auspicious occasion, I have to say that I am very much impressed with my friend Dato' Tahir for his sincere work and kind contribution to Indonesia and other countries in the region. Your visions, a better Indonesia where every individual has access to adequate healthcare and education that enhances their quality of life, is both inspiring and very significant. I do share your vision on this, and I can tell you that I will always be there to support you in achieving your social vision for a better Indonesia and inshallah for a better world. Last week thank you. Last week, I had a good discussion with Dato' Tahir on the possible topic that I could share in this presidential lecture. From all of the options, he suggested to me to speak about my 10 years presidency, which was a challenging period of time for me in leading Indonesia, in managing tasks and challenging, in running the government, and in finding solutions. And this is why I am here today. Of course, my friends, it is always great to be back in Singapore. I have lost track how many visits I have made to this country. I come here so often that the Indonesian embassy staff are too familiar with my habit. A visit to Kinokuniya bookstore at Takashimaya, especially after Borders bookstore closed its door, and a quick stop at a noodle stall nearby. That's my favorite food. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Singapore has achieved remarkable progress as a nation. As a city-state, an island state with modest population and no natural resources, Singaporeans from the start had faced an uphill struggle to survive, let alone succeed. I fail to recognize the president of UGM, University of Gajah Mada, Ibu Tikura. But as you mark your 50 years of independence, here you are now. You have become a modern, developed nation in the heart of Southeast Asia with high quality of life. From a society of migrants and traders, you have developed a strong national identity and pride as Singaporeans. You have scored impressive gain in global ranking on education, on competitiveness, on innovation, on ease of doing business, and many others. And diplomatically, you have punched well above your weight in the world community. You have become a positive example of the good things that come when a nation applies the rule of law, good governance, hard work, and sound economic policy. Ladies and gentlemen, I will speak based on my experiences. Therefore, in this lecture, I would like to connect my experience in leading Indonesia with what we can learn from management and leadership standpoint. I hope this will be useful for all students here in preparing for real life after you finish your study at SMUs. In 2004, right before my first presidential election, I was invited by the Institute for Defense and Strategic Studies, IDSS, and the Straits Times in Singapore to share my visions, my hopes, and my aspiration for Indonesia's future. The vision which highlighted the broad policy agenda that I intended to pursue if I was to become president of Indonesia. When I completed my presidential term in 10 years later, I can say with confidence that I was able to achieve some of these promises, and frankly, some were not. Overall, I would like to say that probably over 70% of my commitment have been achieved. Back then, I pointed out that what we needed in Indonesia was not change for the sake of change, but change for the better. A better government, a better economy, a better society, a better political culture, a better environment, simply a better future. I said that the most difficult things for any nation to do is to reinvent, I should say to reinvent itself, and to adapt to evolving circumstances, to change the way we govern, to change the way we present and carry out leadership, to change the way we conduct politics. All these changes will remain a challenge for a great nation. It was often said that Indonesia is a very difficult country to govern. But I had also found that this complex nation has very simple needs. When all was said and done, Indonesians aspire some very basic things: prosperity, peace as well as justice, and democracy. On prosperity, in 2004, the economic growth is around 4.5%. My ambition was to increase, I should say to increase it to close to 7%. In reducing poverty, the government must allocate more funds to help the neediest amongst us, to provide them with better basic health care and providing better education. My development mantra was a four-track strategy, which is pro-growth, pro-job, pro-poor, and pro-environment. As a result, I could manage 6% economic growth at average. Unemployment rate was less from 10% to under 6%. The poverty rate was chopped from 17% to around 11%. With regard to peace, I targeted the peaceful solution to armed separatist movement in Aceh and Papua, as well as to completely end communal conflict in Maluku, Poso, and elsewhere. Furthermore, I aim to heighten the intensity of our counter-terrorism effort. As a result, with the help of Indonesian people and our cooperation with global community, most of the security problems to a large extent could be solved by the end of my presidency. On justice and democracy, I aim to make sure that the rule of law prevailed. I continue to be equally vigilant in our anti-corruption efforts and enforcement. I wanted communities across Indonesia to enjoy a simple rule that nobody was above the law. I upheld human rights by making sure that the law respects personal freedoms and rights for both men and women, rich and poor, across Indonesia. On the diplomatic and foreign policy front, I aim to continue promoting Indonesia's independent and active foreign policy. I wanted to project Indonesia as an open, tolerant, modern, democratic, outward-looking country with a strong voice for peace and justice in the international community. Furthermore, ASEAN was to remain as the anchor of the Indonesian foreign policy. I understood that the regional order and security architecture would continue to evolve. ASEAN will need to maintain its cohesion and dynamism in order to manage an increasingly challenging regional order. I stress the importance of closer relations between Indonesia and Singapore. Singapore is the most developed country in Southeast Asia. It has the most international outlook and is the most connected to the global economy. And as a close neighbor, Singapore has always shown a willingness to go the extra miles to help Indonesia in times of difficulty. Again, most of the priorities were being addressed. Indonesia fought hard against corruption. The rule of law and human rights were respected. Terrorist threats were being scaled down. Our international voice was heard. ASEAN continues to thrive, and Singapore remains Indonesia's close friend. Back to my talk before the IDSS and the Straits Times here in Singapore in 2004. I did convey to the audience in that forum that despite my ambitions for a better Indonesia, I was not a Superman, because I did not have any magical power that could make all the things come true overnight. Ladies and gentlemen, on October the 20th, 2004, I was sworn in as Indonesia's sixth president and the first to be elected directly by the Indonesian people. Despite the joyful moment of the inaugural ceremony that day, what raced through my mind was how I would fulfill the hopes of 250 million people for a better future. I did really understand that the strategic environment posed great challenge for Indonesia, globally and regionally. Globally, the world was in a record situation. The crisis in the Middle East has crippled several countries in the region, including Iraq. The tension between Islam and the West were on the rise. Regionally, in Asia, the situation was also challenging. Regional economy had not fully recovered from the deep financial crisis in 1997 that had wiped out most of Asian emerging economies. As I was about to embark on a new journey for Indonesia, I also realized that I was confronted with several complex and delicate issues. In addition, the people's freedom was far too great and way too hard to be handled in an open democracy era. Nevertheless, the fact that I was the first directly elected president of the country did not make things even easier. For sure, expectations and hopes of the people were very high. At the same time, I was well aware that the government limitation and constraint in fulfilling, I was well aware of the government limitation and constraint in fulfilling everything the people wanted. There were so many tasks and challenges facing my government at that time. Let me remind you that I inherited a state which had begun to recover in terms of government capacity. The economy was picking up, but it was still hovering below 5%. As an IMF patient, Indonesia was still in debt with the international financial body for more than $7 billion. Our democracy was becoming more steady, but relations between the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, and all the institutions within them were still fluid. Security had improved, but there were still problems in Aceh and Papua. We were still in the middle of a 10-year military embargo placed by a number of countries, and corruptions remained a persistent and pervasive challenge. I knew full well that Indonesia's success was relevant not only to our nation, but also to the region and the wider world. As the largest country in Southeast Asia, the whole region was invested in our peaceful transition. And while I realized that Indonesia had the potential to be one of Asia's giants, I was determined that we must be a benign one. By the time I assumed office, the financial crisis was already 5 to 6 years behind us. This is important because it was the 1998 financial crisis that compelled us to reform. With the crisis returning to a degree of normalcy, there was also the danger that the nation would reach a false comfort zone. The worst thing that could happen was for the reform process to begin losing steam at a time when things were looking up for the country. I knew that the drivers of change would have to draw on other sources, namely leadership and governance. Stability, growth, progress, all this could only be achieved if we set the right priorities and execute bold policy measures to achieve them. My instinct in leading Indonesia, therefore, was not to go slower, but to run even faster with reforms. In the course of doing so, we did not just reform, we transformed. We elevated our ambition from reformasi to transformasi. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, based on all the tough tasks and challenges that lie ahead, I deeply thought about how I could solve all the major problems and fulfill the dreams of the people for a better Indonesia. As the leader of Indonesia, and based on so many agenda, goals, and objectives to be fulfilled in economy, politics, security, justice, and international relations, I really had to play several roles at once. It was similar to play many chessboard simultaneously. Let me tell you how complex it was. First, as the national leader and head of state, I had to align the people with vision and missions. I also incorporated values and principles to be followed by the people to achieve the goals. Second, as the head of government, I needed to run the government to achieve all objectives while solving all the problems we were facing. Third, as a political leader, I tried to maintain and manage the balance between freedom and the rule of law, between liberty and security, and also between national unity and decentralization, as well as regional autonomy. Fourth, as a crisis action leader, I had to manage several crises that occurred in Indonesia, ranging from economic crisis to natural disaster to internal security and to political tensions. Fifth, as the commander-in-chief of the Indonesian military, I had to ensure the correct use of military force while completing the military reforms that had taken place since 1998. And lastly, as the foreign policy president, I needed to enhance Indonesian roles and contribution to the maintenance of peace, stability, and order in the region. And as a member of the G20, Indonesia must also contribute to the stability and growth of global economy. With regard to these various roles, I would like to share 3 points that were critical to my 10-year experiences in leading Indonesia. Number 1, democracy. Number 2, prosperity. And number 3, security. Let's discuss these one by one. Learning from Indonesia, it is critical to remember that democracy cannot be taken for granted. There are many cases around the world where democracy falters, stagnates, decays, crumbles, or reverses itself. And there is no single cause why. Sometimes it is because authoritarian tendencies were too strong. Other times it is because inability of the political elite to embrace democratic rules, or because democratic institutions could not develop. In any of these circumstances, an economic crisis, or internal security threat, or a political scandal could easily trigger the collapse of new democracy. Indonesia is one of the last countries that joined the so-called third wave of democratization that began in the mid-1970s. I remember those early days of democracy well. There were many skeptics. Democracy, some said, would not last long in Indonesia. The people were not ready. The country was too big. The nation was too complex. Democracy, they said, would lead to chaos and even the breakup of Indonesia. Others said what happened in Indonesia was just regime change. My favorite columnist, Tom Friedman, said that Indonesia was becoming a messy state. And there are those who predicted democracy would unleash extremism and radicalize Indonesian politics. Because of this concern, many Indonesians were as excited as they were anxious about Indonesia's political journey into this uncharted territory of democracy. Today, we can take a sigh of relief as the good people of Indonesia have convincingly refuted this concern. Our democracy has become stronger and more vibrant than ever. Indonesia successfully held what is said to be the world's largest and most complex election peacefully. Rather than breaking apart, Indonesia is becoming even more united, as reflected in the Aceh peace deal. Rather than becoming a bastion of radicalism, the heart and soul of Indonesia remains moderate and progressive. Indeed, in Indonesia, democracy, Islam, and modernity can go hand in hand together. And despite the early years of turbulence, where we changed president 4 times in the 4 years between 1998 and 2002, our democracy is now delivering political stability and economic growth. Indeed, I would say that democracy in Indonesia has reached a point of no return. There were many signs of this. We have safely passed the 3 election tests and also passed several presidential change over peacefully. We had radically and fundamentally changed the political landscape in Indonesia. And as a result, our national and local direct election, we had instituted strong military reforms when the function of the TNI, apart from defending the territory of the state, is also to guard democracy and reform. In spite of political problems that sometimes arise, there has never been any concern about an impending military coup. There are countless public opinion polls showing that even though the public may lose faith with politicians, institutions, or policies, their faith in the value of democracy remain unshaken and in fact only increase over time. The conclusion is crystal clear. Democracy is here to stay in Indonesia permanently. But let us not forget that our democracy is a work in progress. Democracy is a journey that never ends. It took the British democracy 792 years from the Magna Carta, the American democracy 231 years from the Declarations of Independence, and the French democracy 218 years since the French Revolution to get to where they are now. And even today, these democracies are still evolving. Indonesian democracy, over a decade old, will also continue to evolve. I do not have a crystal ball to predict where and how our democracy will evolve over the long term. But democratic transition is not a linear process where you go in the path from a straight line from A to Z. In many cases, it is a stop-go process, ripe with ups and downs, and shocks and jolts. Every democratic transition is unique to its own circumstances its own context and its own dynamic, as well as historical and cultural tradition. And this is also what we in Indonesia must continue to do, to adapt, to shift our mindset, to reorder our priority, to embrace change gracefully and intelligently, to chart a new course for Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, but don't get me wrong, democracy alone will not necessarily provide all these answers to our problems. The key challenges in all this is to effectively connect and combine democracy with governance. I have long realized that democracy does not come automatically in the same package with governance. Democracy does not necessarily deliver us peace, prosperity, security, equality, and national unity. Democracy can only deliver these precious things to our life if it is equipped by governance, good governance. If there is disconnect between democracy and governance, you will have a dysfunctional democracy. The world is full of examples of democracies becoming unstable, democracies in decay, democracy in regression, and democracy ruined by conflict and poverty. We had no intention to take that route. I believe if we establish a healthy connection between democracy and governance, two things will happen. First, democracy will go hand in hand with stability, hence producing what I would call democratic stability. And secondly, democracy will be blessed with prosperity, which means more growth, more employment, more equality, and better standard of living overall. Hence, what I would call democratic prosperity. In these two instances, democracy will live up to its promise, the promise to deliver a better life, better freedom for all citizens. In building society, I have high appreciation for Singapore. Although Indonesia is far more complex due to its size, its diversity, and its status as developing country, I believe that there are many things that can be learned from our neighbor, Singapore. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, now let me take you to a second critical element, which is prosperity. I know economic policy generally have pros and cons. For my part, I would like to think that my economic vision based on the four-track strategy I have mentioned already. This strategy aims to promote a balanced and comprehensive economic development. Additionally, I also emphasize the need for a development framework based on the principle of sustainable growth with equity. Once again, sustainable growth with equity, where the expanding economic pie does not produce larger inequality, but leads to greater equity. I also stress on the need to promote a resilient and vibrant domestic market. I am pleased that these strategies have proven effective in keeping the Indonesian economy afloat in the midst of the global economic slowdown. We managed to withstand the 2008 crisis, but we know that was not enough. Since the Eurozone crisis was still raging, we were closely monitoring its development and trends. When action was called for, we were not shy to take appropriate and robust measures. We adopted a crisis management protocol as a contingency against a full-blown crisis. As our economy did not depend too much on export, we relied on domestic consumption and investment to drive our growth. To mitigate the social impact of the economic crisis, we provide vulnerable members of our society with microcredit through our National Community Empowerment Program. We work hard to raise our medium and long-term agricultural productivity through public-private investment. Indonesia also made a strong push in infrastructure development through our master plan for the acceleration and expansions of economic development. The master plan seeks to step up program in the prime economic sectors, speed up infrastructure development, ensure energy security, and enhance human resources in science and technology. We made sure that this master plan was developed with all the stakeholders, the central government, the regional government, the business community, the state-owned enterprises, the economists, scholars, and the interest group. As a result, in spite of the challenges to the global economy, Indonesia proved her resilience, our political stability, our prudent fiscal policies, and our commitment to inclusive economic growth served us well. Ladies and gentlemen, dear students, the last critical thing is in the realms of security. There were many things that I did in this aspect, but today I will share one. Indeed, our main challenge in promoting international security is truly on how to build strategic trust among countries in our region. Strategic trust is a term that evades precise definition, but in my view, it refers to an evolving sense of mutual confidence between nations, particularly between governments and militaries. When two or more parties begin to have faith regarding the goodwill and intention, then strategic trust is set in place. This will enable them to cooperate more, to invest in one another, to trust their instinct, and to exert more effort for peace. And like any form of bonding between human being and institution, strategic trust is something that must be earned and built brick by brick. Let me give you one example. Indonesia and Timor-Leste had a very difficult, painful history between us. Many lives were lost and also properties. Emotions were high and national pride was hot. Many predicted that the trauma was so severe that the relation between Jakarta and Dili were permanently damaged. But we proved them wrong. With goodwill and courage, both Indonesia and Timor-Leste worked closely to create a new relationship. The TNI and the Timor-Leste military worked together to manage border security. We have developed a creative arrangement for the citizens of Timor-Leste to travel with ease to their enclave in Okusi, which is located within Indonesian territory. We have resolved our land border demarcation, usually a difficult issue in relation between neighbors. And perhaps, most importantly, we found a way to address sensitive past human rights issues by forming a joint commission for truth and friendship. As a result of this and many other initiatives, some 13 years after the UN had popular consultation, relations between Indonesia and Timor-Leste now rank among the best among neighbors in this region. We in Indonesia also practice this internally with regard to the Aceh conflict, which lasted over 3 decades and cost thousands of lives. A number of peace initiatives were launched but failed. Then in 2005, following a deadly tsunami, we decided to change the game. We let go our exclusively military solution and made a new approach for a win-win peaceful political solution based on special autonomy. At first, this new approach was met with strong suspicion by GAM political and military leaders. But we persisted and slowly we gained momentum. GAM leaders began to understand that we were serious and sincere. In about 5 months of negotiation, we reached a historic peace deal, and by doing so, we transformed former enemies and combatants into partners for peace and development. Today, GAM combatants have long left the hills, given up their weapons, rejoined society, and become part of a permanent peace and vibrant democracy in Aceh. The enmity and hostility of yesteryear has been replaced by a prevalence of trust. In both the cases of Indonesia-Timor-Leste relation as well as in Aceh peace, trust becomes a precious commodity that, once achieved, should never be taken for granted. There are too many examples around the world where hard-won confidence turns sour overnight due to an incident, miscommunication, false expectation, leadership change, and other factors. Trust, therefore, is a never-ending work. Distinguished guests, dear students, my experiences in dealing with three critical points, democracy, prosperity, and security, has shaped our Indonesia today. With all this, my past decade of leadership has been called the transformational decade by World Economic Forum. In spite of our achievement during this transformation decade, there were still much homework to be done. Indeed, sustaining Indonesia transformation will require the hard work and diligence of the country's people, and particularly its leader. As a large country that stretches across 3 time zones from Sabang to Merauke, much remains to be done in terms of developing infrastructures. I had made it a priority for Indonesia to enhance our internal connectivity through infrastructure development across the country. We strengthened the rule of law and good governance, and we work hard, real hard, on combating corruptions, which remain an uphill battle even today. Also, like all Indonesians, I knew that harmonious relation among our diverse ethnic and religious groups is of supreme importance to our national survival. We must continue to work hard to maintain moderation, pluralism, and tolerance in our society. I certainly hope that with all this, in 2045, after 100 years of independence, my visions of an Indonesian fully transformed will become a reality. An Indonesia that is democratically mature, stable, and peaceful. An Indonesia that is economically strong, equitable, and sustainable. An Indonesia that is well plugged with the world. An Indonesia not just ripe with freedom, but also with opportunity. More than a decade ago, many would have thought this vision unconvincing, but today, this is a future well within our reach. I am confident that Indonesia will emerge to be a vibrant nation living in democracy, peace, and progress. Due to our size and geopolitical situation, Indonesia must always contribute to regional stability and international cooperation. Here is where I have high hopes that Indonesia can continue our partnership with Singapore. Like Indonesia, Singapore has much to offer to the world. Singapore has the most advanced economy in Southeast Asia, is an essential member of ASEAN, and has become a valuable global player. Much is riding on our positive relation, not just from the bilateral standpoint, but also for our common regional and global interests. Ladies and gentlemen, dear students, let me make some final remarks on leadership and managerial lesson. Indonesia is a very large, diverse country. No one could successfully lead the country without sufficient managerial capacity. As a military officer and then as minister, I have learned to develop my leadership and managerial skills in preparing for a mission, in making decisions, in developing strategic plan, in taking care of logistics, and in execution of things. However, no one is truly prepared to become president. As president, especially of a country of 250 million citizens, I dealt with things on a much larger scale than a military general or minister. I needed to have a holistic vision. Every decision has to be judged and weighed in terms of how it connects with other realms. You may be dealing with a sectoral issue, but you need to access how that sector from the interest of the whole country. Leading Indonesia is not just about managing diversity, but also managing complexity as well as adversity. The most important point for me in leading and managing the country was to build a credible and functioning systems of governance. The system cannot be personalized as had happened in the past. It had to be built on institution, on clear rules and norms, on meritocracy, on a healthy checks and balances, and on earning public trust. Once the system works well, then usually things will begin to fall into place. This is important because in my job as president, I dealt with countless interests, including vested interests. Some people try to come to me through the front door, back door, or side door to bring their interests. I will receive them politely, but at the end of the day, I always ask them to resolve their issues through the system, the legitimate system. Different leaders have different ways. In my case, I am the type of the hands-on leader and like to go into detail. I need to be pragmatic and adaptive, but I must have clear vision in my mind. I cannot make decisions in the absence of detail and also in the absence of certain fundamental principles. Often, overlooking details can lead to serious failures. When we negotiated the peace agreement with GAM, for example, I did not just look at the big picture of persuading GAM to accept special autonomy status. I look at every detail in the agreement regarding the movement of the troops, the timing of surrender of weapons, human rights provision, local election rules, and so on. The key, however, is important for a student who studying leadership and management, is to not lose yourself in the detail. Keep your eye on your strategic objective and use the details to get you better informed on how to achieve your end goal. Another important point is having a good team. A president, no matter how good, cannot function without a good team supporting him. Conversely, a weak president probably can do much if supported by a good team. I therefore took much care in selecting a good team. Competence and integrity were not negotiable. I interviewed each and every one of my prospective cabinet ministers before I hired them one-on-one. And I asked every one of them to sign a strict ethical political contract with me before I hired them as minister. Yes, I had to take political appointees because that was the nature of political dynamic, but I always tried to make sure that the political appointee had to complete, I have to say, to make sure that the political appointee had the competence needed for the job. And I always push all the team members to commit to a higher standard by way of the regular cabinet meeting held every week. I also ask every minister to submit an achievement index annually so I could check on their progress. I believe Indonesia was able to reach a new height during my decade in office because, in overall, We had a good team, not just ministers, but also special staff at the president's office. Another key point is coordination. Yes, it sounds a cliche, and I know you have heard it 1,000 times, but I cannot stress enough how important coordination is to the functioning of government. Miscommunication, misunderstanding, mismanagement lead to misstep and to missed opportunities. That is why, during my time, I maximized the role of the coordinating minister. I made sure each one of them did their job to see to it that each minister under their umbrella performed in sync. I also set up a special unit to ensure coherence and evaluate the performance of ministers. Because of their sensitive assignment, he was not always very popular. I mean, the chief of the evaluation, I should say, presidential delivery unit. He was not always very popular among cabinet members, but I can testify that this method did raise the standard of governance during my time. I also made the practice of having regular meetings with all the governors so that they are up to speed with what the central government is doing and targeting. It is in this meeting that the leaders of Indonesia can ensure that in the era of autonomy and decentralization, the country can still move forward together. It is also critical to know which issues belong to you. In a country as large as Indonesia, there are a million issues. I do not have the time nor resources to deal with all of them. Each day, the media and the public and the politicians expected me to deal with a particular issue, even on why the road in front of their house was not paved. Yes, this is true. I needed to be selective in terms of adopting what were to be the so-called presidential issues. Issues necessary for the president to get his hand on. It is not always easy. It is not always easy. I needed to keep a sense of what was important for the good of the people and what was important to the principle upon which the republic was built. Actually, many of these issues belong to the local leaders, the governors, the regions, the mayors. I always ask if the mayors or the region were doing something about it. By doing so, I try to be more efficient in the exercise of my duties. But most importantly, as your tennis coach would tell you, keep your eye on the ball. Never lose sight of your objectives. I had only 10 years to achieve our national objectives. It seemed like a long time, but for me, it went by like a flash. In that short time, I had to make sure all resources were mobilized and used correctly, and all our strategic and tactical objectives could be met. I always reminded myself where Indonesia should be by 2014, the end of my administration. And I constantly pushed myself and my government to rush to that point. There was never time for complacency or to be stuck in a false comfort zone. Leadership was always critical for movement, and that leadership is applied at all levels, from the highest all the way to the lowest echelon. So, these are some takeaways that I hope will be useful to you, the student of SMUs, as you learn to become good leaders and managers. I strongly urge you to possess not only good managerial expertise, but also to shape your leadership skill to work toward your success. The combination of the two will nurture your vision so that you know where you are, where you want to go, and enroll your team in charting a path for the future. Leadership and management skill will shape your integrity, which is crucial to get your people to believe in you and to buy into the journey you are taking them on. In short, ladies and gentlemen, those who master both management and leadership skill will surely create a competitive advantage at work and for in life. I thank you.
Thanks to the gracious willingness of our speaker, we have about 15 minutes for questions from the audience, and I will give preference to the students. I will not add SMU, any student is fine. But before I ask the room what kind of questions they have, President, I have one myself. You've partially answered it, but as an outsider, one of the major achievements you have had with your administration is making Indonesia a lot more peaceful country. Indonesia, before you arrived, had many conflicts that you had been referring to, the East Timor, the Aceh, Moluccas, and probably many more than that. And somehow you managed, and you explained a little bit your attention for detail, your patience, whatever, but you explained how you could pacify to some extent, or to a large extent, the country. There are lots of countries in the world that would actually probably want to learn from you how you did that, because there are lots of countries that have conflicts. What's the secret?
Thank you, Professor. There are many things to do when we are really wanting all conflict to be solved. My ideology is peaceful solution, peaceful conflict resolutions. After we were able to end the conflict in Poso, in Ambon, and other parts of Indonesia that was categorized as communal conflict, we aim our attention to solving problems in Aceh. And in this thing, we have to change our mindset, our approach, our strategy, and our policies. For almost 30 years, we used military force to end the conflict. It did not work. So I kept saying to my fellow Indonesians, the objective is not to continue combating GAM movement. The objective is to end the conflict peacefully and to ensure that Aceh is still a part of Indonesia. Mm-hmm. Our sovereignty, of course, must be respected by all countries, by many elements in Indonesia. But when it came to approach to strategy, we could choose what is the most effective ways in ending the conflict. So my administration chose to have negotiation, peaceful solution. So no more than, I believe, 7 months negotiation, we finally had peace deal. So the second thing is changing from always using military forces to end the conflict with negotiation and peaceful solution. With Timor-Leste, what we need to do is a confidence building, is trust building. Timor-Leste will be our neighbor forever. And I asked my colleague, President Den Sanana, Prime Minister President Ramos Horta, to have a new approach again. And we finally agreed to have a, truth and reconciliation process. Mm-hmm. So instead of maintaining our distance, Indonesia and Timor-Leste, we outreach one to another, and finally we agreed to have a peaceful recovery, if I may say so, by addressing all our past hostility, entering new chapter on our battle relation, and finally, after around 3 to 4 years, we were able to put our past hostility behind us. So those things that I did, becoming part of our those things that in my thought was becoming part of our success in ending
all these conflicts.
Internal threat back home as well as conflict.
I open it for the room. Any questions from the room? There are roving microphones. Yes? Actually, no. You look too old to be a student. I'm going to first look, are there any students? And be careful, I know quite a few of you, so I'm going to cold call if you don't do it, right? Right? Okay, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, but President many times addressed the students, so I should give you the opportunity. Yeah. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, good afternoon.
Speak loud.
Hi, good afternoon, Professor Dr. Yudhoyono. I am Hans from SMU MBA. So my first question is actually something that really quite not have to do with the past achievement that you already have, but something that has to do with the future. So it's regarding a policy that is made by your successor, President Joko Widodo. It's economic policy to actually grant tax amnesty to foreign investors. So I would like to ask about your, from your considerable experience as President of Indonesia, in the times of economic downturns like this, is it wise to actually enact that kind of policy to grant tax amnesty to foreign investors? And my second question would be, this policy would actually be aimed to boost the trade in Indonesia, but what would be actually the trade, the object of trade, in your opinion, that will be the focus of the policy?
I know it's always difficult to answer a question about your policies of your successor, so if you want to refrain from answering, that would be okay.
Sure, sure.
But the second, can you phrase the second question clearly?
What will be the object of investment that is currently very attractive in Indonesia? Yeah.
Yes, I do believe that my successor wants to develop our economy. I think all presidents of Indonesia have the same commitment, same ideas how to build our country for the better of the Indonesian people. So I trust in my successor and his government to continuously develop sound economic policy that will bring real benefit for our economy, for our people. On second point, yes, investment and trade, of course, a source of economic growth. We understand well that from demand side economy, what should Indonesia do is to ensure that all components of growth can be advanced from time to time. We have strong domestic consumption, thanks to our people. So we have to maintain the purchasing power of the people so they can still buy goods and services. Number two, government spending. Of course, I know that all president and minister will do their best to ensure that government spending can also stimulate growth. And then your two questions, your 2 points, investment. Investment is very important. That's why from time to time, I did also in my years to improve the overall climate in doing investment and business in Indonesia. From security dimension, from law enforcement, sound economic policy, sound taxation policy, everything. We continuously conduct reform on that point. And trade is also a source of economic growth. And I think Indonesia realizes that because of the fall of the commodities, mineral resources, palm oil, etc., we need to change our strategy. We cannot rely on the commodity-based export. We need to do more in developing our industry, in developing our service economy, many things. So the point is, of course, Indonesia needs our investment and trade to grow. And I do believe that the government is doing its best, actually, to attract our foreign investors to do more trade with our trading partners, including Singapore. Singapore is our strong partners in trade and investment. And hopefully, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, President Jokowi can have continuous talk how to integrate, how to connect our two economies, because if we could combine our resources, our potential, then we could do more in advancing our economies.
Any other question? Thank you. Any other question? Yeah.
Thank you for coming, Mr. Professor Dr. Yudhoyono. My name is Rama. I'm from SMU. I've got some questions, but first, regarding your aspirations of the sustainable growth equity, how do you ensure that your vision is conveyed to the present regimes so that they share the same, if not the common aspiration as yours? Especially since in the most Asian countries, you know, the authorities quite change frequently, and the staffs and the ministries, all that. How do you ensure that your vision are shared to all of those?
Yeah, thank you. How do you share your vision about sustainable growth and equity with your
well,
colleagues?
Every president has his or her vision. My successor, President Jokowi, has his own economic policy. And of course, or at least I do believe that he tries to develop sound policies in our national development. But your point is very important. If I could share with you, the trends of all nations all over the world is now moving toward green growth and sustainable development. And it's not only to be shared by Indonesia, by Singapore, but after Paris conference, to be shared by all countries in the world, that in every national development, there are three things to really be really understood. Number one, of course, we need economic growth. Without growth, we cannot reduce poverty. We cannot create jobs. We cannot build infrastructures. We don't have any revenue to provide a budget for healthcare and education. Number one, growth. Number two, I think we need to take care of our environment. It's very important. This is the spirit of Paris conference. And last but not least, social inclusion. So at least there is three pillars in our new sustainable development: a greener economy, greener world, growth, social inclusion or social justice, and last but not least, environmental protection. So I do believe that all government, all president, all prime minister will really understand the importance of those three things to be adapted, to be applied in their national agenda and policies.
We have time for one very short question, and this time not from a student, but from Dr. Tahir.
I'm a student.
Oh, you're a student too, that's right, yes.
PhD
But
degree,
a short question, because I know that President
Pak President, just now in your speech, Pak, you share with us that during 1998 to 2004, we have a 4 president change, and you successfully to have 10 years tenure to be the president. What is your secret, Pak? Can you share with us, Pak? Thank you.
My friend, there are two things. Number one, God help me to stay in power. Then number one. Second recipe, if you want to be an Indonesian leader, you must be really patient. You must be willing to sacrifice, like your books, Living Sacrifice. Because, you know, Indonesian today, the politics is very noisy. The expectations of the people are very high. People want everything to do it now, not tomorrow. Everything must be done properly. And as a leader, on the one, I have to listen to their aspiration, but on the other hand, I have to go through. Because if not, if I am disturbed by demonstration, by street protests, by the noise in the Parliament House, so I could not work. So with patience, with determination, I know the noise is big everywhere, but I have to go through. And in 10 years, finally, I have to say, well, I reached the objective after 10 years. So two things. Of course, we pray to God by doing what we have to do very seriously. Of course, God will not help us unless we are doing our best, trying our best. And number two, what I did is as patient as possible and willing to I try to use your language to sacrifice as a leader. That's important.
On that note, I think we had a master class.
Professor De Meyer will now...
Sorry. I think we had a master class in what political leadership is all about. I think most of us will not become leader of a country of 250 million people, but at least it gives us a glimpse of what it entails, what it requires. And I would like to thank Your Excellency very much for having taken the time to be here with us today and be so open in your sharing with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was great.